to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about some alterations that have supposedly been made to the contracts of both Nick Martinez and James Bradberry that have freed up some cap space on this year's salary. I broke down the New York Giants salary cap, and I was excited about what they did in free agency. I thought it was a smart approach. Like I said, I wasn't in love with all their signings, but I thought it was smart that they front-loaded the contracts, giving them flexibility for the foreseeable future. Well, apparently, Dave Gettleman and the New York Giants now are going against that. They've now restructured the contracts, and I'm going to show you the exact implications that it will have on future salary. Now, the good news is, if you're a win-now person, the New York Giants have freed up an additional $10 million in salary cap space, and they have about $20 million on the cap. I'll get into the exact specifics in a second, that they may be able to go out and bring in another free agent. The one thing I will say, if you go back and remember, Dave Gettleman said that he wanted to have $20 million set aside for in-season moves. So we're going to see if he's a man of his word. My personal opinion at this point, if you're going to do this, I would rather spend that money and bring in a player, because you had set it up where you weren't going to have a big cap hit the next 2 years. You would have been able to get out of the contract of Nick Martinez going into his third year. You're not going to be able to do that now. Hopefully he works out. Hopefully he's good. But you always want that insurance policy. And the same can be said for Bradberry. Both of them, their dead cap hits will be way too much. Now, I'm not going to go crazy. These are 3-year deals. They're still relatively young. I think they're both 26 years old. So it's not, the contracts don't go into their 30s. It's not the end of the world that we're going to have to keep these guys for 3 years. But it would have been nice to have that extra cap space for next year and the following year to try to retain players like Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones possibly the following year. That may no longer be an option. And if it isn't, well, they won't be able to bring in, an extra free agent here or there because they restructured these salaries the way they did. If Gettleman wants to save $20 million, you're not going to see another signing. Now, what can they potentially do with this money? We'll get into that in a second after we go over some of the figures that have been transpired according to Dan Dugan and Jordan Rannon. Jordan Rannon of ESPN initially reported on this, and then Dan Dugan did a really good job on Twitter, who reports for the Giants, breaking down the new salary cap implications. Dan Dugan said in response to Jordan Rannon's initial tweet, "Well, so much for totally front-loaded approach. This reported change adds $10 million more in cap space for this offseason than would have been available based on this roster bonus-only structure, while increasing cap hits in 2021 and 2022. And I'll get into the exact cap hits and the implications for future cap space now because of this move. The number in the parentheses would have been the cap hit for this year and the following 2 years. The numbers to the left are the cap hits now. So you look at James Bradberry. James Bradberry initially was a $16 million hit in 2020. Now, because of this restructuring and, the bonus money, however they did it, the redistribution, it will be a $10 million hit, freeing up an additional $6 million this year, as opposed to a $16 million hit. But if you look in the next 2 seasons, it would have been a $4 million hit in 2021. Now it will be 17, so that's an additional $3 million against next year's cap, and the same for 2022. So $3 million more will be going to 21 and 22. And with Martinez, it was $10 million this year. It will now be 10.2 and 10.5, where it was initially 14. So that's the additional $4 million in savings. Like I said, I would imagine the dead cap hits will be larger now in the third year, making it harder to get out of these contracts. So that will be, the negative to this. Obviously, the positive is the Giants have more cap space, more freedom to do things within season. Now, this is the salary cap chart before these moves. When I did my last video, I made a mistake. I did not account for the fact that this actually includes draft expenses. If you look there at that $12.12 million mark, that is projected draft expenses. At the bottom here, before these moves, they had just over $10 million in space. Now, that will jump up to just over $20 million in space, which takes me back to my initial point. Dave Gettleman said before free agency started that he wanted $20 million set aside for in-season moves. If that's the case, he has his exact number. We'll have to wait and see if he's a man of his word, but in my opinion, I think they would have been better off leaving the contracts as is if you're not going to spend that money anyway. I recognize that it's nice to have some extra money for in-season moves, but $10 million, in my opinion, would have been more than sufficient. You had to dedicate $12 to the draft. My mindset was always he wanted $20 million combined for draft and in-season moves. $20 million for in-season moves seems a bit excessive to me, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense. And at this point in time, in my opinion, now that they've done this, I'd rather them go out there and try to spend that money, at least some of it, and bring somebody in, whether that's bring back Marcus Golden on $10 or $11 million, even though I'm not his biggest fan in terms of schematic fit, whether that's try to sign Jadeveon Clowney on a one-year contract for $17 million, or whether that's try to orchestrate a trade for Unique Ngakoue. Am I in love with any of these ideas? Not necessarily, but I honestly don't understand the mindset of doing what they did unless, the plan is to try to bring in another piece. We're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out, but I want to get a quick video up on it explaining what has transpired according to both Dan Dugan and Jordan Raanan of ESPN. So there you have it. I'd like to get your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Where would you like this money spent, or would you rather them just sit on the $20 million? As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.